Hi everybody, my name is Rin Longmaid. I'm a restaurant broker and consultant at Longmaid Restaurant Sales and Consulting, Santa Rosa Business and Commercial in Sonoma County, California. I'm also the founder and host of this series, Deep Dish Live, where we explore the business of restaurants for restaurateurs, restaurant buyers and sellers, and the restaurant curious. Today we're live streaming, this is episode 15, we're live streaming from Legit Provisions in downtown St. Helena in the lovely Napa Valley, and I'm going to be discussing percentage leases and restaurants. Are they a good fit? So this series, Deep Dish Live, streams once monthly. It used to run between 30 and 40 minutes long, but in 2022 we've made the decision to shorten them up. I'm going to try to do today's episode between 10 and 15 minutes long. As I said, there's been, let's see, we've got 15 episodes posted on my website. I have a YouTube channel, please subscribe. There's also a blog post, which I'll talk about later. So if you'd like a chance to win a $100 gift card from our host restaurant today, Legit Provisions, all you need to do is like and post a comment on this post, either while it's live on Facebook or after we post it later. You can do this on LinkedIn. You can do it on YouTube channel. We'll look at all those. We'll throw all your names into a basket, not really a basket, an electronic basket, and the winners are randomly selected. Today, we'll be announcing at the end of the show our $100 gift card winner from Brick Maiden Breads, where we live streamed in December out in Point Reyes in Marin County. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into today's topic. So a percentage lease, I'm actually going to read this. A percentage lease is a type of lease where a tenant pays base rent plus a percentage of gross sales over what's called a natural break point. It's a common lease in large retail centers, and it can be used by restaurant operators who are seeking to operate in a location that might be super expensive, like maybe $10 a square foot. If a restaurant operator is going to have like going to be executing on a concept that hasn't been tested yet, it might be wise to negotiate a percentage lease with the landlord rather than get locked into a very expensive lease. One thing that you should know at the onset, a percentage lease is like a hybrid between it'll be a fixed cost and a variable cost, because there's always a base rent with a percentage lease, and then there's a variable rent based on gross sales of the operator, whereas rent generally is a fixed cost. So a lot of operators kind of shy away from percentage lease because it sounds like it's going to be a lot of rent, but you know, if the restaurant operator does their due diligence, it can be a really good way to satisfy a landlord and secure a dynamite location. So one thing I'm going to say, whenever I'm discussing leases or the restaurant industry, I'm usually thinking about an independent single unit operator in California. So all those things differentiate, or very depending on what the concept is and how they operate and where they operate. All of the factors that I talk about are different. So that's what I'm discussing. So I'm going to jump into this explanation. I have a blog post that always runs concurrent it runs on the same topic as the Deep Dish Live episode. I write them out. They're not transcribed from the video, so they're very clear and succinct. So if you find this hard to track today, which I think it's going to be hard to track, jump on my blog post. I'll have it up maybe in a week or so, and you can get all the information there. You can always reach out to me directly. I'm super busy. Texting is always best. My contact information is on my website. So I'm going to use an example. I'm just going to jump into an example of what a percentage lease looks like. So a percentage lease, there's always going to be a base rent. So for this example, let's just say base rent is $5,000. And the landlord and the restaurant operator have negotiated that it's going to be a 6% lease. So the break point, it's called a natural break point, will be determined by those two, the $5,000 base rent and the 6% percentage lease. So what you do is you just divide $5,000 by 6%, 0.06, and you get something of like $83,000, $333,000. That's the gross sales that the restaurant will make. Anything above $83,000 and some change, the difference, the operator will pay 6% of the difference back to the landlord, right? You don't understand that, do you, Ed? So let's say the operator for 1 month, typically we calculate this on an annual basis, but for today I'm going to do it on a monthly basis. If the operator had $100,000 in gross sales for the month, the way that the rent would be calculated would be that $100,000 less that natural break point, the $83,333, which is a little over like $16,500, a little over that. So the operator will pay 6% of that $16,000, which is roughly $1,000. So rent for that month will be the base rent of $5,000, 6% of the gross sales that were above the natural break point, which is about $1,000. So that's $6,000 in rent. So you see that $5,000 was a fixed cost. The percentage is a variable cost. It runs in line with the gross sales. So again, one of the reasons that this kind of lease isn't for everybody, one, it feels complicated, but if you sit down with somebody who's qualified to explain it to you, it's not that complicated. One of the least attractive parts of this lease for an operator is you have to hand over your books to the landlord. Maybe not your full financial statement, but certainly your gross sales. So maybe your POS statement for the month, something like that. Not everybody wants to do that. Most restaurant operators don't like to hand their financial statements over to anybody. One thing you might have noticed, what I haven't mentioned in this percentage lease are triple nets or CAM expenses, which I've described in multiple episodes in the past, but for our purposes here, those are expenses that the landowner incurs as a function of owning the property tax, insurance based on the building, and common area fees, which might be maintenance of the parking lot or utilities like lighting for the parking lot, admin fees, property management fees, maintenance fees, fees that the landlord incurs almost always get passed on to the tenants on a pro rata basis. I'm not going to explain that for now because I'm trying to do this in 10 to 15 minutes. So a percentage lease still includes generally triple net and CAM. So you can see this lease is a little bit of everything. You've got your base rent, you have your percentage rent that gets added on top of it, and then you still have your triple net. The restaurateur still has the triple net or CAM fees. So those of you who are really familiar with the restaurant industry or who have watched my series, you know that there's no secrets to the margins, the success margins, operation margins of the restaurant industry. Those are changing due to COVID and concept changes. Restaurants are changing how they do business, quite frankly. I'm going to throw these out because they've been the standard for so long, but I think they're going to change. So in Northern California, occupancy costs, restaurant occupancy costs, the amount that the restaurant should dedicate to securing the premises, that would be base rent plus triple net and a couple other fees, should be between 7 and 9%. 10% in a dynamite location where you have high gross sales. 10% for most people, they'll never be able to achieve profitability. But you know, the thing about a percentage lease is the restaurateur might be misled, thinking, oh, I'm only ever going to pay 6% of my gross sales. That's not true, because because the operator needs to be thinking about those triple nets and CAM. So the way that you calculate occupancy costs or the gross sales needed to support your occupancy costs versus that lease are different. I'm not going to go into it now, but just don't get confused. Just for the most part, like that example I said, let's say triple net fees and expenses monthly were $1,500. My guess is that the occupancy cost there would be 7%, maybe 7.5%, not 6%, which is still fine for that operator. But the restaurant operator really needs to get in there and muck around with the numbers to make sure when they're negotiating with the landlord that they're negotiating terms that they'll be able to support for long-term success. So, as I said, let's see. So the other thing that that operators can negotiate with the landlord when they're negotiating these terms, that $5,000, that's the base rent, that can be negotiated. It can be higher or lower, that can be negotiated. So that's a bottom cap. There's also a top cap, right? So rather than the restaurant operator being liable for that percentage rent up into $5 million worth of sales, they can cap it at, once we get to 3 million in sales, that's it. Landlords don't usually like to do that, but operators can negotiate that. Other things they can negotiate is, well, the thing to be aware of, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to wrap it up, is that the reconciliation for the percentage rent being applied to the restaurant operator can happen monthly, it can happen quarterly, it can happen semi-annually, or it can happen annually. However it's reconciled, what that means is you're paying that $5,000, the restaurant operator is paying the $5,000 plus triple net and expenses, writing that check out every month to the landlord no matter what. Then the operator hands over their financial statements, the landlord's property manager or accountant or somebody figures out what the percentage rent due is from the operator and is charged that. So what you don't want to do as a restaurant operator is count all of your income as income, because a chunk of that is going to have to be applied to the rent at some point, either monthly, semi-annually, or annually. The way that I see restaurants fail is when those costs, another cost that's very similar to that is retail sales tax. If an operator treats percentage rent or retail sales tax, if they're treating that money that's coming in as income, then they might find themselves unable to pay the retail sales tax or that additional rent when it comes due, and they'll go out of business. So you want somebody in your corner, that either a restaurant broker or a real estate professional or a CPA or an attorney that understands the mechanics of a percentage lease and keeps you on track throughout the year. So again, if you're just joining me, I'm going to go ahead and announce the winner from Brick Made and Breads, who's my very close friend, Jenny McClellan. She's a real estate agent at Vanguard in Sebastopol. Jen, I can't wait to give you the gift card. She's one of my besties. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Ren Longmaid. I'm the founder and host of this series, Deep Dish Live, where we explore the business of restaurants for restaurateurs, restaurant buyers and sellers, and the restaurant curious. If you want to win a $100 gift card to my host restaurant today, Legit Provisions in downtown St. Helena in Napa County, please like and post a comment on this episode anytime between now and the next time that Ed and I will see you, which will be on Wednesday, I think March 16th next month. Bye, everybody.